seats. We'll start in about 1 minute.
One kind of class is when we have documents about the topic. And the second is like national cultural heritage. And I'm sure that with regard to theory, probably they will both. They could be both. I mean, like churches, I mean, like fortresses.
Okay, if you all sit down, please, and we'll start. If you have a cell phone like I do, please put it on vibrate now. So you don't hear your phone go off in half an hour. Please, check your phones, everybody.
Thank you for reminding.
Okay, my name is Martin Eskejian. I'm the chairman of the Ararat Eskejian Museum. Today's lecturer, Maggie Goshen, who's standing in the back, does all the work. I just come occasionally. The museum and the chapel above were designed and built by my father, Luther Eskejian, the genocide survivor, and his vision was to build this museum and the chapel that's above us. My dad came to this country at about 8 years old. His father, who has his cloak from being a minister, is behind the stage. Reverend Hovan S. Eskejian was running an orphanage in Aleppo and smuggling children out and trying to get them into homes instead of being killed. And they came to arrest him the day after he had died of typhus he caught from the children. My father was running errands and messages back to the West, dressed as a little kid and run messages. And my dad got a medal for doing that when he was a little boy. But anyway, Entebbe is a very important to my family and to many of the people in this room. My grandmother was from there, and my grandfather was the minister between Entebbe and Urfa. So today's speaker is a very special guest we have. One other thing before I get to our speaker. There's going to be an Armenian Legion and World War I exhibit at the Glendale Library, October 4th through the 19th of this year. And Professor Shamazian from Cal State University, Northridge, who is in the back, will be giving a lecture there on the subject at 7 p.m. on the 4th of October. So those of you that can get to the Glendale Central Public Library, that's coming up in October. So anyway, welcome to the Ararat Eskejian Museum. We are supported purely by donations, so if you have a check for a couple $1,000s, we'd like to put it in a little box out there. It would be appreciated. There's no limit to how much you can donate. It's all tax deductible, and we survive only on donations. So thank you all for coming. After the lecture, there will be a documentary video that will be shown, and after that there'll be refreshments, and please feel free to stay and enjoy talking and meeting with new friends and old friends. So, this afternoon, thank you all for coming in this heat. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Umit Kurt. He's a native of Antep. He has a BS degree in political science from METU, that's the Middle Eastern University in Ankara, Turkey. I have a couple colleagues who work there. He has a master's degree from Sabancı University and currently is a PhD student in the Department of History at Clark University in the United States. He's the author of several articles and books, including one that I can't say in Turkish, but I'll say it in English, The Spirit of Laws, Seeking the Traces of Armenian Genocide in the Laws of Abandoned Property, published in 2012 with Akar Akam. His main area of interest is the confiscation of the Armenian properties and the role of the local elites and notables in Antep during the Armenian Genocide. Mr. Kurt?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this generous introduction. I'm so happy to be here, so proud of being with you and to share my PhD topic with you. I would like to thank first and foremost the family members of Eskejian and Ararat Eskejian Museum supporters and members, and my dear Maggie Goshen as well for inviting me and organizing such a great occasion for us coming together. My lecture will be basically based on my preliminary observations and research on Aintab, specifically the role of local elites and provincial notables in destruction and confiscation of Aintab Armenians between 1915 and 1921. The topic, the title of my lecture is The Emergence of a New Wealthy Class Between 1915 and 1922, the Seizure of Armenian Property by the Local Elites in Aintab. The total destruction of the Armenians marked the first time in modern history that a government tried to eliminate a particular group of its own citizens in an effort to settle a perceived political problem. Between 1895 and 1922, Ottoman Armenians suffered massive loss of life and property as a result of pogroms, massacres, and other forms of mass violence. The 1915 Armenian genocide can be seen as the pinnacle of this process of decline and destruction. It consisted of a series of genocidal strategies, the mass executions of elites, categorical deportations, forced assimilation, destruction of the material culture, and last but not least, collective dispossession. The state-orchestrated plunder of Armenians immediately impoverished the victims. This was at once a condition for and a consequence of the genocide. It's fairly important to see the link between the role of stolen Armenians' assets in the integration and the stabilization of the Turkification, which makes confiscation of Armenian properties as a social process. In this respect, the wide variety of participants and the dynamic self-radicalization of the Union and Progress Party and the state institutions at the local level has to be examined. Although the Union and Progress Party was involved in one way or another in almost all confiscation process, frequently controlled them completely, nonetheless, the collaboration of local institutions and officers also played a considerable role. The local institutions and offices, however, could not operate in complete isolation from their respective societies and the prevailing attitudes in them. Expropriation of the Armenians, therefore, was not limited simply to the implementation of the CUP orders, but was also linked to the behavior of local societies towards the Armenians, that is, to different forms of Armenians' hatred. As in the Ottoman Empire, the corruptive influence that spread with enrichment from Armenian property in the whole Anatolia could also lead to various forms of accommodation to the policies of the Union and Progress Party. The robbery of Armenian property was also a useful barometer for the relations of various local populations toward the Union and Progress Party, to the CUP central and local authorities, and also toward the Armenian population of their own cities, including Aintab. With the proven participation of the local population in robbing their Armenian neighbors, it's seen as a product of an increasing radicalization and loss of restraint resulting from the breakdown of social ties along ethnic, religious, and economic lines. Both the role of the local population as witnesses to the Armenian genocide and also the impact of radical Turkish economic exploitation against Armenians, which led to bitter social conflicts over scarce resources, contributed to this development. In approaching this particular topic, a number of key questions are posed. How much and what types of Armenian property were confiscated? What mechanisms were applied and which institutions were involved? What happened to property and which persons and organizations profited directly from the theft? Is it possible to assess the degree of corruption involved? What was the role of local population? To what extent did lust for Armenian property act as a motive for the killings? Finally, what does the perspective of the victims add our understanding of the expropriation process? A careful examination and analysis of these issues can tell us more about both the implementation of the Armenian genocide and the significance of Armenian property within that process. Despite the clear intent for all Armenian property to be confiscated for the benefit of the Turkish administration, material rewards clearly acted as an incentive for collaboration at the regional level. Administrators recognized this motive and tolerated or encouraged it as they saw fit, often taking their own cut. The process of genocide, once unleashed, released dynamic currents that could not necessarily be foreseen or fully control them from the center. As for the widespread collaboration of parts of the local populace in measures against Armenians, the distribution of the great amount of Armenian property provided a useful incentive that strongly reinforced local Armenian hatred and other political and personal motives. Hundreds of officials were employed to handle the administration and the sale of Armenian property. A great many government officials and private individuals, including property assessors, auction houses, trustees, estate agents, notaries, and the transport companies were also involved. The various opportunities for enrichment certainly facilitated the progressed removal of the Armenians, despite the lack of widespread support for Turkish anti-Armenian policies among the Muslim population in Aintab as a whole. The most striking aspect of the confiscation process in Aintab were the careful preparation of the action in coordination with planning for the deportation and its rapid and comprehensive implementation. The prospect of obtaining Armenian property provided an additional motive for many perpetrators or brought more widespread complicity. Whereas the effect on the victims of that property loss was stigmatizing, demoralizing, and debilitating. In a variety of ways, the plunder of Armenian property acted as a catalyst for genocide, as individuals, organizations, and the government competed over the spoils. CUP, Union and Progress Party, was only able to implement its destruction and confiscation policies throughout whole Anatolia with the aid of considerable local cooperation. The confiscation of Armenian property was linked explicitly with plans for expulsion of the Armenians as part of a drive for the creation of homogeneous ethnic nation state. As in most of Anatolia, the removal of the Armenian to the Syrian desert proved decisive in separating them from their property because it was clear that they were not meant to return. All this historical course of events lays bare the fact that process of genocide and deportation directed at Aintabsi Armenians were in fact put into practice by local notables and provincial elites themselves, and these local actors actually prospered and became a new wealthy social strata through the acquisition of Armenian property and wealth. In this respect, I will argue that Union and Progress Party genocide and deportation degree had a certain social background, effective power, control, and support mechanisms at the local levels. Therefore, what took place at the local levels, what took place in Adana, in Cilicia region, in Bitlis, in Diyarbakır, in Digranagar, in Aintab, or periphery, deserves to be examined. By zooming in on Aintab, I hope to shed light on the origins of property and wealth of local and provincial elites, notables in Aintab, and how massacred and deported Armenians' properties in Aintab were changed hands. To date, no comprehensive research has been done that examines detailed treatment of the expropriation of Ottoman Armenians in general and in Aintab in particular as a component of the genocide. As a matter of fact, deportation of Aintabsi Armenians as the earliest inhabitant in Aintab was made in two periods. In this context, history of the confiscation and the pillage of Armenian properties had two distinctive phases. The first deportation of Armenians Aintab had taken place in summer 1915. The first deported Armenians returned to Aintab in 1918. Aftermath of the National Liberation War of Kemalists against French troops, returned Armenians left in 1918 left Aintab alongside French regiments in 1921. The existing literature on this period of history has been fairly one-sided. The distinctions in the historiography of Aintab, in that particular time period has not been come into prominence enough. Having stated that, one of the fundamental endeavors of my dissertation is to write thoroughly the historiography of Aintab between 1915 and 1921. Population of Aintab in 1914, before the Armenian deportation started, was about 80,000. The Armenians constitute a minority, 30,000. These were divided as follows: Armenian Protestants, 4,000, Catholics, 400, and the rest, the bulk of Armenians, belonging to the Armenian National Apostolic Church. There were 2,000 Kurds and a few hundred Sarkazian immigrants from the Caucasus regions, and the remainder of the 80,000 population consisted of Muslims who formed a majority group in the city. In 1918, when the Armenians returned from their exile, the population of Aintab was reduced to 40,000, and 80,000 of them were Armenians. Eighteen out of 40,000. Kevork Avedis Sarafyan says that the news of the first deportations reached Aintab in May 1915, but there was no organized effort for self-defense. On May 3rd, 1915, the Armenians saw a first convoy of 300 deportees containing only women and children from Zeytun pass by the city. In the next weeks, it was followed by caravans made up of several hundred deportees, each from Zeytun, Marash, Elbistan, Gürün, Sivas, and Furnus. According to his account, the first systematic arrest and police searches came on May 12, and around 200 people were arrested in 3 days, although the governor of Aleppo, Jalal Bey, managed to achieve the release of most of those jailed. Raymond Kevorkian explains that 2 Americans from Aintab provide a few details about the caravan of deportees who arrived from north and passed through the city in destitute, even if it had been hard to approach them or give them with relief. The deportees were stationed 15 minutes from the city in a place known as Kavaklık, and they could approach the city only if they paid gendarmeries guarding them a quarter of a mecidiye per glass. At night, they were assailed and pillaged, according to an Armenian witness, while young women were raped or abducted to fill the city's harems with active complicity of gendarmeries and government officials. The site of these convoys continued to be seen in Aintab until the late July. Shortly thereafter, late July, the CUP's responsible secretary in Aleppo, Cemal Bey, arrived in the city. The main duty of the presence of this Ittihadist cadre in the city was to persuade the notables to request that Istanbul officially decide a deportation order for Armenians in Aintab. A meeting called on 29th of July by the local Young Turks corroborated the reception of deportation order coming from Istanbul. At this meeting, a list of the first Armenians to be sent off was drawn up. On the basis of the statements of eyewitnesses, Stina Khachaturian gave the date of 29th of July 1915 for deportation of first convoy of Armenians in Aintab. In the same way, Sarafyan recounts on the same day the first deportation of the Armenian notables and intellectuals took place under the threat of Turkish bayonets. According to the telegram of German consul Rössler in Aleppo, the order to deport the Armenians from coastal zones of the Vilayet of Aleppo, Aintab and Kilis had just been issued on 29th of July 1915. In the first convoy, a member of the city council in Aintab, Nazaret Manushhagian, was attacked and murdered there by the men of the special organization, irregulars or Teşkilat-ı Mahsusa organization in Aintab. The second convoy was systematically plundered by the Çetes, irregulars, less than a day's march from Aintab. In summer of 1915, the first deportees, chiefly Armenian intellectual and wealthy leaders, left Aintab under similar conditions. Sarafyan points out that fortunately they were not murdered en masse. They found refuge in Aleppo, Hama, Humus, and Damascus in Syria. Only after the total expulsion of apostolic Armenians, the authorities issued the order in September 19th to deport the few hundred Catholics of Aintab who had initially Spain. By late September, 3/4 of the Armenian population had already been deported. The Protestants were told that they will not be molested, probably for the simple reason that under the American churchmen they were the proteges of the American embassy. But as soon as the United States entered the World War I to rescue the Allied powers from their dire military position, these Armenians was not spared either. They were deported to Derzor, where all of them were annihilated under the most horrible conditions. There remained in Aintab only in a few thousand Armenian craftsmen and artisans to help the Muslims to carry on their existence. Every day, from 103 families were forced to put on the road. Concomitantly, the city's Armenian neighborhoods were transformed into huge bazaars. In these bazaars, Armenian properties and their assets were sold off at ridiculous prices. The authorities seized all non-Turkish schools and all churches. They confiscated the stocks of the store. They rented the most beautiful houses at fairly low prices and attributed the others to Turkish families. The Armenian cathedral was turned out to a storehouse for abandoned property and then converted into a stable after all the objects deposed there had been sold off. In order to make certain transactions easier, the major beneficiaries of these acts of despoliation considered that the director of the Aintab branch of Deutsche Bank, Levon Sahakyan, was immediately deported and he would later be killed at Derzor. As regards to the expropriation of Armenian properties, Armenian sources specify that the authorities did not allow the deportees to sell their real estate before being expelled. It was stipulated in the law, by the way, before Armenians, the decision of the deportation were promulgated. The new director of the local branch of the Bank Ottoman, Lehon Maher, played a significant role in confiscating Armenian property. He urged businessmen to deposit their most valuable assets, such as silver, gold, jewels, account books, and acknowledgements of their debt in his bank. In this way, he installed a company along with Turkish partners and bought their assets on 1/50 of their real value, thus amassing a personal fortune. The case of Kendirjian brothers is a very good example of indicating seizure of Armenian properties in Aintab after deportation. After being expelled from the city, the vast farm asset of Kendirjian brothers were taken over by the state or a private individual. This case also illustrates the application of the ideology of national economy or Turkification of the economy by creating wealthy Turkish Muslim classes in the local level. It's remarkable to reveal that the provincial elites of Aintab, like Barlas family, Göğüş family, Kimya family, Kepkep family, they wanted to guarantee that they could enjoy the Armenian deportees' property. For that immediate purpose, the members of the Ittihadist Club and the provincial elites directly took part in the liquidation of around 50,000 Armenians from Aintab who were expelled to Derzor. According to the accounts of Aramandonian, documents presented by Raymond Kevorkian, these groups organized an executive committee, incorporated Dalbaf Kimizade, Nurbey Orlu Kadir, and Hacı Halilzade Zeki, who went to Derzor in order to make sure that the Armenians had indeed destined to die, so that they will not have to worry about returning their property there. This aspect of the deportation of Armenians in Aintab demonstrates the origin of direct and active participation and support of the Muslim local notables to the genocidal policies of the central authority. The stake at here was the plunder and the seizure of movable and immovable properties of Armenians, which constitute a palpable motivation for these local elites to take part in the deportation process in Aintab. As far as the organizational character and the role of actors in deportation of Armenians in Aintab are concerned, the close coordination and collaboration between the central authorities and various local actors are of great importance. One can possibly argue that without the strenuous efforts exerted by these diverse local actors, it would be unlikely for the CUP central political powers to come through expulsion and slaughter of Armenians and finally the spoliation of their properties in Aintab. Having expressed that, the deportations organized in Sancak were superintended by a Sevkiyat Komisyonu, deportation committee, presided by the Mutasarrif, the one who works under the governor of the city, and comprised Bilal Hilmi, a judge, Hacı Fazılzade Nuri Bey, the leader of the irregular Çetes, Molla Şehzade Arif, the Mufti of Aintab, Sheikh Ubediyet, and Hacı Azade Ahmet. Alongside Ahmet Bey, the second Mutasarrif, those mainly responsible for the deportations and the plunder were Mustafa Efendi, the president of the municipality, Besim Bey, the head of the treasury, Bilal Hilmi Bey, Bilal Hilmi Bey, a judge, Kazım Efendi, an official in the census office, Eyüp Sabri Bey, and Hacı Yusuf. Eyüp Sabri Bey, by the way, was arrested by the British forces in December 1918 because of his offense and his accusations against Armenian properties. And Hacı Yusuf, secretaries in the Department of Finances, Kemal Bey, a commander of Jandarmerie, Bilezikzade Arif, Bülbül Hoca Efendi, the former Mufti, Mehmet Efendi, the Sheikh of the Bazar. These are all local and provincial actors and elites in participating in the spoliation of Armenian properties in Aintab. As Sarafyan remarks that, apart from the first two groups which were sent toward Damascus, entire population of Aintab deported from the city were sent toward the Akçakoyun railroad station, where they were put in a transit camp surrounded by barbed wire while waiting to be loaded into stock cars and transported to Aleppo and then sent on foot to the region of Zor. Last but not least, there should be mention about Armenians in Kilis, whose fate was closely bounded up with that of their compatriots from Aintab. It should be pointed out that historical narrative and accounts for transpiring the deportation of Armenians in Aintab could hardly be separated from that of Armenians in Kilis. Deportation of the Armenians of Kilis started off on the same day as it took place in Aintab, the late July 1915. The first destination for the convoys of Kilis deportees was the Katma railway station, where a primitive camp had been hastily set up. Around 300 people, basically craftsmen, were permitted to remain in Kilis for a while so as to provide local needs of the people. They were eventually deported in turn. Entire Christian symbols and ritual objects of the Armenian church were purged, immovable property seized after its owners were perished under the command of the local unionists so that it was unlikely to protest. Again, according to the Andonian documents, Armenian survivors from Kilis compiled a list of the 107 people who were chiefly responsible for the crimes committed in the course of the deportation and were the primary beneficiaries of the spoliation of Armenian property. So, in brief, Armenian wealth provided the particular incentive for the cooperation of the indigenous local forces and people in Aintab, acting in support of the CUP civil and military officers. Local inhabitants in Aintab pillaged large amounts of Armenian property, with or without the permission of the central or local authorities. The participation of those local people is a necessary condition to ensure the effectiveness of genocidal policies. Today in Aintab, the origin of wealth of number of local and provincial elites who have become urban bourgeoisie and integrated into global finance capital lies in the plundering and depredation of Armenian properties. If the archives of the institution of title deeds and cadastrate in Aintab are open for researchers, this reality will be easily seen. Thus, my own study will attempt to employ title deeds in the hands of Aintabsi Armenians in order to investigate how exchange of Armenians' properties were carried out and whom took the possession of those properties in Directorate General of Land Registry Cadastrate in Aintab. These title deeds in the hands of Aintabsi Armenians coming from their ancestors in Aintab are considerably crucial sources in revealing how the confiscated properties of Armenians in Aintab were transferred to the others who were mostly Turkish Muslims. In a nutshell, I see the fate of Armenian property as a barometer of local relations between Armenians and Muslims. For parts of the local population, the acquiring of Armenian property was an important incentive for participating in the anti-Armenian measures. The prospect of personal enrichment served effectively to implicate and integrate local collaborators within the process of destruction and looting. For the Armenian survivors, subjected to the repeated attacks on their lives and possessions, the base motives of their former neighbors left some of the most indelible ones, a painful human history that lies behind the numerous property lists preserved in the archives. Thank you so much for your attention. I would like to show some maps, pictures for your attention. You see Aintab region, left over here, almost. So another deportation roads, Damascus, Hama, Humus, Aintab. They come all the way from Arab. You can? Okay. And it was the croquis of the Aintab. This Armenian quarter, this part. You see, it's an American college, Central Turkey College was located. And this map from Kevork Avedis Sarafyan's famous book, Atmuçu Antepsi Hayot. You see American college, and this part, Armenian quarter, the church, Protestant church and St. Mary Church were located here. Vartanyan School, Hayranishyan, Hirpsinyan School were located this part. And Akçakoy rail station, the Armenian deportees were being awaited here to wait for the train to be sent off to Kama, Humus, Resul Ayn, and all the way to Derzor. These are deportation roads. Katma railway, another railway station. Islahi is just up north. So these are designated locations which I have determined as yet. It's about 200 locations which were Armenian locations actually. Now I'm trying to find out houses, shoppings, and all the buildings who are now possessing it in Aintab. These are 2 locations I have determined. Now I'm trying to find out the current owner of those locations. And this map from Abadi, the Colonel Abadi, he was the commander of French regiments during the war between Kemalist Turkish forces and the French forces in the city between 1919 and 1921. You see the Armenian quarter of the city and the Turkish quarter, and the skirmishes were taking place right over here, this line. And this is the current Google Earth map. The Eyüboğlu Mahallesi, Eyüboğlu neighborhood, and Bey Mahallesi, Bey neighborhood. This area, Armenian quarter. and all the panoramic view of the city. You see the St. Mary Church, which was converted to mosque in 1988. It was used as a prison until 1984. It carried all, features of Christian church, Orthodox church, but of course it was decorated with the Muslim and the Islamic figures. The castle, you see this, it's a Catholic church, which is called Kendirli. And across the way, our main quarter, these are all our main houses. A panoramic picture of another one of our main quarter. And Girls Seminary School in Aintab. Now it's being used as a part of American Hospital. And the Kendirli Church, Catholic Church. And the skirmishes between French and Turkish forces just took place around the Kendirli Church, and the walls of Kendirli Church are full of bullets, holes. And this is Nazar Agas Khan, Dabbakhane or Tabakhane, famous. And now there are some Armenian burials over here. See the St. Mary Church. And it was this picture is indicating Nigosyan Agas School, which was under the need of Çınarlı Cami, and it was demolished after matter of the war between French and Turkish forces after 1921. And Demirciyan family, very wealthy, well-funded family in Aintab. All their properties were taken over by local notables in Aintab. Çekiçyan brothers, Çekiçyan family is another wealthy and famous family, well-established family in Aintab. Cebeciyans, Levonian family, Ovanes Levonia, and Guleserian family in Aintab. You see, Catholic Church is located over here now. St. Mary Church, Akyol. Akyol Mahallesi, it was a sheer Armenian neighborhood before. And Leylekyans, one of the Leylekyan houses. And our main quarter, our main houses currently in Aintab. I have just taken these pictures when I was in Aintab 2 months ago. Our main streets, our main neighborhood and streets. Kastelbaşı and Vartanyan School. Sorry, it's a Karamanıkyans building. Sorry, now it turns out to be a museum.
Oh, yeah, we
Yeah.
saw those.
Yeah,
Been there.
Karamanıkyans.
It looked like it.
And Milletkhane, which was established in 1862. Tütünhane, or actually it's a Kürtçüyan family's khane. You see Kürtçühane. It's called Tütünhane for the time being. So the current situation of our main quarter of the city at the moment. This part, castle, you see. These are all our main quarter. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll hold the questions till after we see the documentary, and then we have the potential questions. So we'll move right on to the film.
father of Arabic culture. My fatherland, the sweetest thing.
Louder, please.
She's trying to make it louder.
I wish this earth could
Patience.
tell us what it can see. As a child, I was a branded item with this fictitious item. Item, Al-Leban, Jaffa Kebab, item C. Conclusion was that there was item and only item. The rest was not. They always asked, item, listen, and then there was a good answer to it. There was item college, item Volpanos, American hospital, there was item kebab, item lahmacun, particularly the chikiftet and yahni kiftet. Constantly talking about item. Now let's go search this item of the article, which used to be a fiction, now it has become a reality.
Maybe you can put the mic next to computer.
It's not long enough. I feel like I'm on top of the world, so powerful, so energized, looking down at the panorama of the Nightown. The citadel is a mini replica of the citadel of Aleppo. I could feel the energy of my ancestors within me.
I can't wait to get down to the Armenian neighborhood to see the old homes and whatever Armenian I could find. I was surprised to hear that this old lady had sent her grandchildren to ask us in to show us an Armenian home which was built at the turn of the last century. The house had a nice courtyard, fountain with a fish pond. Then there was a sala where they crushed the grapes to make wine or to make anything, any sweet with wine. They crushed the grapes with their feet and put the pot underneath to get shire, sucuk, bastır, kasma, and these are sweets made with grapes. She was delightful. She had a nice Aytap Turkish accent which I hadn't heard for a long, long time. We left the home as if we had visited one of our old relatives. An old man was sitting on a bench in the park. He was about 93, 94. I sat with him and asked him about how old he was and who he was. And I told him we were Armenians. Oh, he was delighted. He said, after our Armenian friends disappeared long time ago, my brother and I were devastated. My friends just disappeared and never came back. We are human beings and we were brothers. Armenians left Aytap and they took the barakat with them. They took the blessing with them. This is what he said. I wonder if my father has played in this neighborhood. We came across to this house where there was an engraving on the wall. It said, Rab Sadır'ın hanesinin barakle, Asbaz Korkni Havadatsyamin. God blesses the believer's home. It was written in Armenian letters, but in Turkish. So the Turks, they couldn't read it. A Kurdish family had bought the house, and curiously they dug the basement to see if they could find any gold, but all they could find was a skull of a human being with a nail nailed to the forehead. I wonder if my father lived around here. This is an old Armenian church demolished. The door was stolen, replaced with an iron door. We are in the Armenian quarters of Aytap, now mostly demolished, to pave the way for new roads. But a few years back, when I first visited here, there were visible homes, but in ruins. Now they're all gone forever. The famous Asbazadin Church, built in 1892, stands with its grand glory, with only minor additions of the two minarets. As you can see the bell tower on the right, it is changed to a minaret now. Krikor had the guts to get in and sing two gorgeous sharagans. Just listen to a full Armenian church acoustics. Only Armenians could have built such a monumental church in the 19th century. It was the jewel of Aytap then, and still it is the jewel of Aytap now. And my father was Aytapci. barber shop is very original. Even the wood is never painted. It's 200 years old. It's got a 100-year-old chair where I sat down to have a haircut. This barber has inherited the shop from his great-great-grandparents. He has been working here for 60 years, and he said many Armenians have been through this barber shop. And I wonder if my father has had a haircut right here.
Ben 60 senedir buradayım.
Sen Martın dahi yaptı. Senden evvel
Babam, dedem, onlar hepsi var.
meçhale, ailesi meçhale. Bu dükkan kaç senelik?
Bu dükkan 200 senedir.
Ay ay ay. Yes, bu hali darba. Chestnut, 200 years old. Baba ve senin deden
Evet.
Because now it is they completely rebuild it.
Many Aintabti Armenians have had great luxury homes all over Aintab. That's why they think they are superior to the rest. They've been well-to-do, well-educated at Aintab College. Now, years later in Aintab, one of this modern Armenian family house has become a museum for Aintab. The well-to-do Karamanukyan's house is a model house of a luxury living towards the turn of the last century. There's a room for the mother-in-law, senior bride, junior bride, new bride, large kitchen, nice furniture, Armenian carpets, wine cellar, and you name it. Nice apricot tree right in the middle. It's a 3-story house now changed into a museum. Thunder room in Armenian is Toneri Senyak, where we got together in the winter to warm under this comforter. We socialized there. This is a wine cellar. They must have had lots of wine. Here it's about 10 degrees.
Now outside is about 40 degrees. After a long search, we came to this red sign which said American Hospital. According to my father's diary, the orphanage was in the premises of the American Hospital. My father had lost his parents just before the First World War, must be 1912, 1913, and was taken to the Halarjan orphanage by his younger aunt, who took him to the orphanage, bribing him with a coin and a pocket knife, and then she took him there, met with another lady friend of hers, and she disappeared. He was assigned a senior boy to help him around. So we were thrilled with this discovery. We went through the gate. Wow, what a nice garden hospital with lots of fruit trees, grass, greenery, flowers, etc. Now where do we go from here? My father has written this diary in March of 1948, and he describes the orphanage in details. It has the Ottoman emblem on it.
American College դասնի ֆրանկյան փուլի վրա է եւ մենք պետք է American College երթային պապաստիկը
My father describes 1914 to 1918 as horrifying years, as a nightmare for them. They were ordered to evacuate the hospital immediately in one day because the Turkish army was coming from Urfa to occupy the hospital. So they worked like an army of ants, grabbing anything they can carry. They rushed down the hill to get up the hill to go to the Aintab American College. They were told they have no permission to go to the college until doctors Merrill and Shepard came for their rescue and saved them. This was the day when they were all to be killed. In the group, there were Verabat Veli Karabet and Abraham Haritunian, Dr. Merrill's wife, Abraham Hoja, a famous teacher, Digin Ofsanna Küpelyan, their principal, and her two daughters, Araksi and Agnes, Baron Sarkis Balyan, Baron Lutfi Kundakjian, Sarkis Balabanyan, and a few Mayriks, plus the orphan boys, around 80 of them. He says, God helped us, and we safely went up the college and stayed there for 3 years. Our food was one bowl of watered down soup a day and a piece of chekcheki bread. For 3 years they stayed at the college until they escaped to Aleppo. The boys in the orphanage fed themselves by night on these fruit trees. The apricots, the grapevines, pomegranates, pistachios, walnuts, pear trees, peaches, olives, cherries, and lots of other berries. Tooth, mulberries, and lots of berries. In the morning, when they couldn't hide their stains on their clothes, when they couldn't hide the stains on their clothes, they had a beating by their teachers. But that never stopped them. This is the well where they had daily cold drinking water.
Kızlar Koleji. Kızlar Koleji.
Kolej o tarafta.
O tarafta
Ben şimdi poliklinik olacağım. Kimse bilmiyor.
Orada Koleji.
Kolej olacak.
Field kindergarten, Mama is not there. Americani vatandaşı sentarța columnura unde ieșume era minierul anul gudani. Sentarța pago yerbades pançarnos ujjai orvaz tarțar karar olmayan zararlı koçre küçük devletmeyi sıfır bayılan
Ima jedna je konkretna. Jedna je.
We are at the American Hospital backyard, where the Haladjan orphanage had originated. We are trying to find it, but I didn't have any hopes. We sat down for a bite, and my friend Dikra just asked me to turn around. And what a view, what a shock. Just by mere accident, we're sitting right in front of the cave where the orphanage used to be. My father describes it as a cave with 3 windows. Now I am in an emotional shock to face the real thing which I was not ready for. This was it. I'm here, right at the orphanage.
Bulmamız asıl. Araç.
From this cave, the boys were finally moved to the 3rd floor of the hospital. They had a decent sunny room with long double windows, shiny wooden floors overlooking the city. They heated the room with their breath and with their body heat. My father now would have been 101 years old, born in 1905. But I swear,
We have time for some questions now to ask our guest speaker.